Nora, and thank you everybody for joining me here today. As mentioned, my name is Sage Hart, and I'm an attorney with O'Byrne Law, where my practice focuses on estate and special needs planning. So I assist individuals with disabilities and their family members in putting together estate plans, last will and testament, special needs trusts, as well as addressing any issues that may arise with their benefit programs. So legal planning generally just one part of the bigger process of planning for the future of somebody with a disability. And I like to start my presentations with this diagram that touches on the four main areas of planning considerations. First, we have, and what do we envision for a good life for an individual with a disability? This is their personal needs, such as making sure they have a home, a good circle of support when a parent's no longer able and available to support them. Second, there's considerations for the public benefit programs. What services, health insurance, and income is available to an individual with a disability through benefit programs. We also take a look at supporting their decision making as much as possible, as much as an individual's able to make their own decisions. How can we support them in doing so? And if necessary, pursuing guardianship. And then lastly, that fourth element is estate planning, creating a last will and testament, a special needs trust using an ABLE account if necessary, as well as putting in place financial goals for an individual with a disability. You'll notice that this diagram has that yellow arrow, that yellow circle in the middle of the four main considerations. And that's because these decisions that are made at each of these different points are going to continue to evolve over time as the individual's own circumstances are changing. So when we put together our estate planning for an individual with a disability or their family members, we want to make sure that that plan is flexible to reflect these changing needs and goals for an individual with a disability. My presentation today is going to focus primarily on this estate planning aspect, but special needs trusts, and I'll also talk about ABLE accounts. However, throughout the presentation, I may touch on some of these other areas as well, as they often overlap in our considerations of how to plan for the future. I have to give my disclaimer at this point that any advice I'm providing today is not legal advice. Every individual's circumstances are different. And this is just a general overview of some of the options and planning tools that are available. As Nora mentioned, if there are any questions that come up, please feel free to shoot them in the chat box. I can't see any questions that come up at this point, so Nora is going to feed them to me, and I'll try to remember to stop throughout the presentation to see if there are any questions. All right, to get started, one of the first questions we ask our clients is, what are they planning for in terms of planning for their child? And as we mentioned, this is the element of envisioning a good life for their child. And this could be making sure that they have housing, that they can live independently with supports. This could be making sure that a child has supported employment, or that they may continue their education, whatever those unique goals are for, as a parent, of plans for their child. And one of the aspects of this planning that, as a special needs planning attorney, I can help with is that making sure there's financial security for an individual who has a disability and able to work. And this can be achieved through maximizing the benefits that are available through public benefit programs, as well as setting aside any other resources or assets in a special needs trust or an ABLE account. A special needs trust and an ABLE account are vehicles that can hold funds for the benefit of an individual with a disability in a manner that doesn't interfere with their eligibility for benefit programs. And so we try to look at both the benefit programs and the special needs planning tools together to make sure everything is is maximized both for the benefits and the other private funds that are available to support this individual. In terms of the personal goals that a parent sets for their child or the family member sets for another family member, we encourage all of our clients to put together a letter of intent. This is not a legal document that an attorney drafts for you. A letter of intent is either a written Word document, it could be a binder, a folder, in which a parent just records, again, those personal goals, those unique circumstances. It can also list physicians, any routines that an individual with a disability has, as well as vacations, any of those personal items that you want to have carried on when in planning for your child. And this letter of intent serves as a manual for any of the guardians or trustees that you put in place to manage the personal care and financial end for an individual with a disability. And so we encourage all of our clients to consider putting together this just informal planning guide for the benefit of their child. And we have our own form suggestion for clients to consider. If anyone wants to email me, I'm happy to provide that as a resource. Or if you Google letter of intent and on the internet, you'll get plenty of different examples that other people have pulled together and recommend as a good starting point. Again, there is no form for a letter of intent, but I just wanted to plug it in here as an opportunity to record those personal goals that you have for an individual with a disability. Now, switching gears a bit to the benefit programs that are available, there are two main types of benefits that are available for individuals with disabilities, being broken down into two different groups. One are means-tested benefits, which means that the individual's income and resources are going to be taken into consideration when they apply for these benefit programs. The other group of benefits are not means-tested. That means that income and resources are not taken into consideration when determining an individual's eligibility for benefits. And I have grouped the benefit programs listed based on whether or not they are means tested or not means tested. And I'm going to take a closer look at the Social Security programs here in a minute. So the two main programs through the Social Security Administration that provide income to an individual with a disability are the Supplemental Security Income Program and then Social Security Disability Insurance. Both programs provide income to an individual who meets this disability criteria. So the disability criteria is the same for both the SSI program and the SSDI program. And that means that the individual who applies is unable to engage in any substantial gainful activity by reason of a medically determinable physical or mental impairment that can be expected to result in death or to last at least 12 months. So disability criteria, again, are the same for both of the programs, for both the Supplemental Security Income Program and the Social Security Disability Insurance Program. However, the other technical and financial criteria for these programs are different. For the SSI program, an individual must have income below $794, and their resources, the assets that they have, must remain below $2,000 at the end of every month. And the resources that are counted, there are some that are excluded. For example, an individual can own a car in their name. That's not counted toward the resource limit. But any other type of cash or investment accounts that are in an individual's name, money that's tucked underneath their mattress, that's going to count towards this $2,000 resource limit. So it's a strict limit in order to be eligible for the SSI program. That resource limit has been updated in decades. There hasn't been conversation of increasing this resource limit, but what has changed over the years is the tools that are available, such as the special needs trust or ABLE account, that permits individuals to set aside any extra savings that they have in a manner that doesn't affect their eligibility for the SSI program. Now in Maryland, if an individual receives SSI income, they're automatically eligible for Maryland Medicaid, which in the state of Maryland, the brand name for Medicaid is the Medical Assistance Program. So for some individuals, depending on their medical needs, this access to medical health insurance can be more valuable to them than even the monthly income through the SSI program. But this automatic eligibility for medical assistance through SSI is helpful for many individuals.
We've got a few questions rolling in. Would this be a good time to take a few?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first, can a legal guardian be the authorized legal representative of an ABLE account instead of the disabled individual over age of 18?
They can, and they can. We're going to be talking about ABLE accounts in a bit. My hesitation is that the rules that are currently in place are subject to change. So under the previous rules, for an adult with a disability who couldn't make decisions, they weren't able to open up the ABLE account themselves, a legal guardian or an agent under a power of attorney could open up the account for them. So the direct answer to your question, Nora, is that yes, the guardian can. There was a federal law that was proposed, and I don't believe the states have enacted it yet, but it opens up the group of people that can open up an ABLE account for an adult with a disability. Guardians are still on that list, but there may be other individuals that can open up that account. Again, I don't believe the Maryland program has put in place yet, but that would be subject to change in the very near future.
Okay, thank you. Someone else would like to know if the income limit is before or after taxes.
It is, I believe it's before taxes. And for the SSI program, I'm going to go back to that slide. They're looking at this disability criteria. They're also going to look at the income that an individual makes to see if they meet the substantial gainful activity has a set amount of income applied to it that they're going to look at each year. So, and I think that's usually about maybe like I'm not going to quote a number, but it's over $1,000. Once that disability criteria is met by income, and they're going to be looking at, again, to the before tax income, they also have to meet this monthly income per month as well.
All right, thank you. And we have a question about how to write the letter. Like, are there any guides about writing the letter?
For the letter of intent, there are some examples online, but really it would be whatever you want to put on paper that's unique to the individual you're planning for. So so again, just some examples. I would put down physicians, any service coordinator or caseworkers you're working with. Collect every year, you're going to get the award letters, put that in the binder, and then also just record some of the personal notes that you have for the individual you're planning. What their daily routine is, who are their friends. If every night the family has pizza, put that in there. If every year they go to a cabin in Maine, put that in there, just so that that personal information is in the letter of intent. There is no formal guide, but there's plenty of examples online.
Great, thank you. And then here's a clarifying question.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have to keep your resources below $1,200 so that you don't exceed $2,000 when the monthly check comes in?
Was that, oh, I see, because the income, they're deducting the income from the resource limit. No, so for the SSI program, they're going to look at what the balance of the account is at the end of every month. So let's say the account reaches, let's say the account receives that monthly income of $794. The balance of the account mid-October is $2,500. As long as at the end of the month, it's again below $2,000, that money is spent, eligibility for SSI will continue.
Okay. And let's do one more here and then move on. All right. If individual SSI income is much lower than 794, can an individual request to increase the SSI to 794?
No. So the SSI monthly payment is the maximum amount that a person can receive is $794. And if, let's say, somebody receives $100 gift from a family friend every month, that $100 is actually going to count against the $794 benefit amount. So that individual may receive less each month. The purpose of the $794, the purpose of the whole SSI program is just the basic safety net for an individual with a disability to ensure that they have funds available to pay for their food and shelter. I don't know of many places that an individual can pay for food and shelter out of $794 a month, but that's the intent for this program. And so if an individual who's receiving SSI benefits also receives income from other sources, the SSI, that it should be reported to Social Security, and SSI program will deduct that amount from the full 794. I hope that made sense.
Great. Thank you so much, Sage.
You're welcome. So the next government program I wanted to speak about is the Social Security Disability Insurance. That is the benefit program. Again, it has the same disability criteria for SSI, but it's not means tested. It's either based on if the individual with the disability has worked previously and they meet the other technical criteria, they can receive monthly income through the SSDI program. Or if an individual with a disability was found disabled before the age of 22, they have the potential of receiving SSDI income on their parents' work history once their parent either dies or retires. The amount of benefits that an individual receives through SSDI is, again, based on the parent's work history. And if a parent has retired, a child would receive an amount equal to 50% of the child's benefit amount in retirement. Or if a parent has died, that child will receive 75% of whatever the parent's retirement amount was permitted when they were alive. The SSDI program, once somebody receives SSDI income for a period of 25 months, they'll start receiving Medicare health insurance, which is again another resource to provide health insurance coverage. There are a category of clients that we have that started receiving SSI income and medical assistance health insurance when they turned 18. They then, upon their parents' retirement or death, switched to SSDI benefits. They moved from SSI to SSDI benefits. And with that, after 25 months, they start receiving Medicare health insurance. There's a special role for individuals who make this transition from SSI to SSDI, and that they get to keep their Medicaid insurance as well. So they'll be duly eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. And this is a good situation to be in. So we encourage our clients, even if they don't anticipate that they will need the SSI income or medical assistance health insurance when their child's before the age of 22, we still encourage you to look into it when a child turns 18, just so you can be on record with the Social Security Administration that the child or their family member was disabled before the age of 22 to sometime in the future possibly qualify for SSDI monthly income, as well as the dual eligible Medicare and Medicaid. So those are just some things I wanted to point out about the Social Security programs and the health insurance programs and how they're different resource tests depending on the program that is applied for. There are more government benefits available to Maryland. I've just listed a few here. The waiver programs are particularly helpful for individuals with disabilities as they're transitioning out of high school into the community. The waiver program can provide residential and employment services, and among many other opportunities. I just want to point out this waiver program as well has that $2,000 resource limit, which means that the individual's resources have to remain below $2,000 in order to be eligible for the program. And although the resource limit for SSI and the waiver program is the same, SSI is a federal program, so it has its own rules for eligibility, whereas the waiver program is administered by the state of Maryland. And so that has its own rules for qualifying what counts as the $2,000 limit. So that brings us to our main question today. And so it's how do we protect this eligibility for these benefit programs when they have such strict resource tests? And there are funds that we want to set aside for them. And Nora, before I jump into estate planning, I noticed that there may be a few more questions. Is that right?
I'm so sorry. I think the plumber's at my door. Why don't you move forward and we can take questions in maybe 5 more minutes?
That's completely fine.
Okay, so sorry about that.
No, take care. I hope that goes well. So estate planning. The basic idea of estate planning is taking a look at the assets that you have and deciding how you want to leave them upon your death. And when planning for an individual with a disability, it's important to make sure that anything you leave for them doesn't go to their names individually. Again, because that's going to count against that $2,000 resource limit for their benefits that they may be receiving. And rather to put the funds into preferably as a special needs trust, which we'll talk about in a minute. So within estate planning, we recommend our clients have a last will and testament. And as when planning for an individual with a disability, also a trust. I want to point out the differences between these two documents as they often get confused with our clients. So a last will and testament is a legal document in which you appoint an individual to carry out the instructions of how you wish your property to be distributed upon your death. And you also provide instructions on how you wish that property to be distributed. Your last will and testament only controls those assets that go through probate. So that means only those assets that are in your name alone and that do not have a beneficiary designation. So if you own a joint account with your spouse, upon your death, your spouse will continue would receive that property, legally become theirs automatically. For your retirement accounts and life insurance policies, those are certain types of assets that you can name a beneficiary to receive the property upon your death. And by designating a beneficiary for that account, it's going to go to the individual that you name directly and not through the probate process. So when we work with our clients, it's not just drafting a will, but it's taking a bigger picture of all the different assets that an individual has to make sure everything passes consistently with their intentions. A trust, on the other hand, is a legal entity. It's an agreement or a contract that a person creates in which they're asking a second person, the trustee, to manage and hold funds for the benefit of the beneficiary. It can be confusing for our clients sometimes because a trust can be included within the terms of a will, but it functions as a as a separate purpose that it functions as the will is going to provide instructions on how the property is distributed upon your death. Once that's complete, the trust is the document or entity that provides instructions on how the property will continue to be managed after your death. If you don't execute a will in the state of Maryland, there are laws that provide the default rules on how your property will be distributed. Usually it goes to your spouse and your children, if you have spouse and children that survive you. And with the child with a disability, again, if you don't plan ahead and make sure that the funds go into a trust for their benefit, they would receive those funds outright, and it would affect their eligibility for their benefit programs until other planning can be put in place. So
Should we stop for a second and take
yeah,
those
this is a
questions?
great place. Yep.
Great, thanks. So this one, if my daughter qualifies for Medicaid, should I still keep her on my private insurance? And if so, which policy is considered primary?
If you have private insurance, the private insurance would be primary over Medicaid. Whether or not you wish to do Medicaid or pay for the private insurance, or sometimes if an individual's younger than the age of 26, they can stay on their private health insurance plan. That's completely up to you. We do have many clients that decide to continue to pay for the private insurance because they may feel that that they get better services, they can see certain doctors that they've developed relationships with over the years, but that's up to our clients. I've seen it go both ways.
Okay. And what counts as a resource that would be included with the $2,000 limit?
Almost any type of asset. I would assume that the asset counts towards that $2,000 limit. There are a few exceptions, such as having a car. An individual can have, I think that's like $1,500 that's set aside for a prepaid funeral. They can own TV, clothing, those type of personal items, but almost anything else is going to count towards that $2,000 limit. And it's definitely going to include, again, money in savings or checking accounts, investment accounts, CDs, any types of savings bonds, any types of those financial assets would be counted.
Great. All right, we got two more for now.
Okay.
Let's see. So if a person got SSI, but later was entitled to Social Security based on his mother's income, does he have a limit for income?
So this is, I just want to clarify the question. If they are on SSI and then they move to SSDI based on a parent's work history, not necessarily parent's income, but work history, there wouldn't be an income limit for their Social Security income program. But if they're receiving any of the other benefits that were listed, particularly a waiver program as well does have income limits, those other programs are going to have to be taken into consideration. Each benefit program has their own eligibility criteria. I was just focusing on the Social Security programs because they're the most popular with our clients.
Thank you. And if switching from SSI to SSDI after a parent's retirement, what services are affected regarding the waiver program?
Hopefully I would expect that the services through the waiver program would continue to be the same if that transition was made. The only times I've seen the waiver program possibly be an issue is if the SSDI, so the waiver program has an income limit of, it's 3 times the SSI benefit amount. So 3 times 794. which I would need a calculator to do. Let me see. So the waiver program currently has an income limit of $2,382 for the vast majority of people transitioning from SSI to the SSDI program, and having that increase in income is not going to impact the services for the waiver program. We do from time to time have individuals who, upon their parents' death, not only are they transitioning to SSDI income, but they may also be receiving income through the old retirement system or the railroad retirement board. Sometimes for military families, they'll receive DFAST survivor benefit plan payments. And so if an individual's combined income based on their parents' death from all these different programs exceeds that 2,382, their waiver programs could be affected. But again, for the vast majority of people, that simple change from SSI to SSDI would not impact their eligibility for waiver programs. Thanks.
And there are a couple more that just came in, if you have time for that now, or if you want to wait.
I would, I'm so happy that there are a lot of great questions. I would like to move forward with the presentation, just looking at the time, to talk about special needs trust, because that's what this presentation was advertised to focus on. And then once we get done with this next section, I'll give a very basic overview so I can give more time for questions. That sound good, Nora?
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. So this is the outline. I hope you guys have had a moment to really take it in of the different special needs planning tools that are available. And by special needs planning tools, these are vehicles or just types of accounts that can be created to hold funds for the benefit of an individual with a disability. Once the funds are in these accounts or in a trust, they're not considered available to that individual for purposes of determining their eligibility for this mean tested benefit. So it doesn't count towards that $2,000 resource limit. This first column of third-party special needs trusts is what I'm going to talk about first. And these are the trusts that a parent or a family member would create for the benefit of their child or another individual with a disability. So that these third-party trusts are what we focus on when we're putting together an estate plan for a family. The first-party trust, that second column down, are a type of special needs trusts that's funded with the beneficiary's own funds. So that would be if an individual with a disability receives an inheritance directly, a first-party trust would be created for their benefit. Should they receive funds through a personal injury accident, that's funds that belongs to them, would have to be put into one of these first-party trusts. We do not recommend family members to put funds in these first-party trusts. As we'll talk about in a minute, there's a lot of restrictions on how these first-party trusts can be used. And up in the top corner, top right-hand corner, there are the ABLE accounts. And these are a type of savings accounts that can be used to save funds for an individual with a disability and complement the use of a special needs trust. We have clients that sometimes have each one of these, they have a third-party trust, a first-party trust, and an ABLE account. Sometimes they just have a third-party trust or a third-party trust and an ABLE account, and they don't have a need for the first-party trust. I just want to point that out, that these are all different planning tools. It's not an either-or situation. Depending on the client's circumstances, they may have multiple trusts. It just depends on what their situation is. But with all of our clients, where we work with them to put together an estate plan for an individual with a disability, we focus on putting together these third-party trusts, which I'm going to focus on in a bit. So a trust generally, again, is it's a type of agreement or contract in which the person creating the trust enters into an agreement. They're called the settler. They enter into an agreement with the trustee to hold and manage funds according to the instructions that the settler left them to benefit a third person, and that's the beneficiary. There are many different types of trusts that can be used for all. They can be used for tax purposes, leaving funds to charities. The trusts that we're focusing on today are called special needs trusts. And a special needs trust is a type of trust that, if it's properly drafted and funded, any assets that are left to the trust, again, are not going to count towards that $2,000 resource limit. So going back to the flow chart I had, you notice that the special needs trusts were divided into two different categories. There was that first column of third-party trusts and the second column of first-party trusts. And again, this division between the two categories is looking at how the trusts are funded. The third-party trusts are funded by anybody except the beneficiary. So none of the beneficiaries' money can go into this third-party trust, and rather it's created by a parent or another family member. Whereas the first-party trust is a tool that's funded with the beneficiaries, the individual with the disabilities' own resources. This is a chart that just explains some of the differences. And again, you'll see there's that thick line in the middle that shows the different groupings of the third and first party trusts. So for the third party trusts, again, these are just as a few examples. Let's go. Let's focus on this page. So a few examples of the third party trusts would be a parent. Again, they were going to draft their last will and testament, and they want to include the terms of a trust within the section of the will. There's also a parent has a choice, rather than including the trust as a section of the will, they can create a standalone trust document while they're alive, and they can either fund it or just leave it as a document itself. And this trust document can receive money from other people as well, not just what the parents are going to leave to it. These third-party trusts are included as part of the estate planning for an individual with a disability, and they can be drafted really to reflect whatever the parents' goals are for their child. There aren't many rules or requirements for this type of trust. The only ones is that the trustee is going to have sole discretion on how to use the funds for the benefit of the beneficiary. And as a result of including that sole discretion language, again, any funds in this trust aren't going to count towards the resource limit while the beneficiary is alive. And then upon the beneficiary's death, the funds can be distributed to whomever the parents have selected, to whomever the settler's individual who created the trust. Whoever they have decided to leave the funds upon the beneficiary's death, that property would be distributed to them directly when the individual with the disability has died. The second type of special needs trusts, again, are those first party trusts. These first party trusts, again, are funded with the individual's own assets. They're a product of federal law in 1993, and which is why they're often referred to as a D4A or D4C trust, and that's just their location in this federal law that permits this type of trust to exist. And what the government decided back in 1993 was they recognized that there was this low resource limit of $2,000 for a lot of benefit programs. And so they permitted individuals with disabilities, when they receive funds directly in their name, again, that could either be through accumulating their Social Security funds, through an inheritance or a personal injury action, and they receive those funds in their names, the government's permitting them to set aside the funds in a certain type of first party special needs trust once the funds are in this first party special needs trust, is not counted towards their eligibility for their means tested benefit programs. With the government permitting individuals to create this type of trust with their own funds, there are a lot of requirements on how the trust can be used, both in the federal law, and then in Maryland, there's a list of regulations of provisions that have to be into the trust. One of the requirements is that there's this requirement upon the beneficiary's death to pay back the state that has paid Medicaid services for the benefit of the individual with a disability. Upon the beneficiary's death, anything that remains in the trust has to pay back the state for Medicaid. And then if there's anything left over, it can be distributed to the remainder beneficiaries. This is a big difference compared to the third-party trust. You'll notice, again, if a parent sets up a third-party trust while they're alive, they can direct where the funds go upon the beneficiary's death, rather than in a case where if they don't set up the trust while they're alive and the funds go directly to their individual or their child with a disability, a first-party trust would then have to be created, and there's this Medicaid payback requirement. So we try to avoid first-party trusts. Sometimes it's necessary, again, just depending on the child's circumstances. It is a helpful tool when an individual receives funds and they need to maintain eligibility for benefits. But if we can avoid them by putting together a third-party trust proactively, we prefer to take that step in the planning. You'll notice that the first-party trust, there are two different types of first-party trusts. Again, one's referred to as a D4A on its location in the statute. The other is referred to as a D4C. The main difference between these two options is that with the D4A standalone trust, that's a unique trust document that an attorney would draft for the individual with the disability. And when this document is drafted, it has to be submitted to the state of Maryland for approval to make sure it meets all those requirements in the regulations. With the standalone trust, the individual creating the trust can select who can be the trustee. And it could be another family member, a friend, a private bank, a nonprofit organization. So there's a little bit more flexibility in drafting a standalone trust, but it's also a bit more work. With the D4C first-party trust, that's actually a nonprofit organization that has gone through the process of creating a trust document and having it approved by the state. And so if somebody wants to join the nonprofit organization, they want to join the pool trust, they would just complete what's called a joinder agreement. It's just paperwork to join the nonprofit organization. They open up an individual account with that organization. So the funds that are added to the account are administered by the nonprofit organization. So the nonprofit organization serves as trustee for the benefit of the beneficiary. It's referred to as a pooled trust because all these individual accounts are pooled together for investment purposes. When we speak with our clients about which option to choose, a lot of times it comes down to how much money is being set aside. The pooled trust being that the nonprofit organization has already gone through the work of creating the trust document and getting it approved, it's typically more efficient and less expensive to join. But also, the second consideration is whether or not the individual creating this first-party trust has somebody in mind that they want to serve as trustee. If they want to have the nonprofit entity serve as trustee, the first-party pooled trust can be a better option. I'm going to touch base on the ABLE accounts real quick. I'm going to leave a few minutes for more questions. I think the presentation was supposed to end at 1, but if it's okay, Nora, I'm happy to stay a little bit later as well to make sure all the questions are answered.
I think that should be fine. Thank you very much.
Okay. So the next planning tool I want to touch on it are the ABLE accounts. And I'm not going to go in depth about ABLE accounts. I'm going to put a plug in right now for on October 19th, Nora has organized another presentation. So it's October 19th at 12 p.m. Kelly Nelson from the ABLE programs going to be giving a presentation just on ABLE accounts. She does a great job. And so if you have more detailed questions about the ABLE accounts, I encourage you to attend that presentation. For the purposes of my presentation today, I wanted to give a brief overview of the ABLE account and then describe some of the differences. ABLE accounts are very helpful tools for individuals with disabilities, but in most cases, they're not going to replace a special needs trust. And we, from time to time, have clients that come into our office that they create an ABLE account for their child, and I think their estate planning is done, but there's a bit more planning that would need to take place. As I'll mention in a bit, the ABLE accounts have certain restrictions on them, so they can't be used for all purposes. But if you haven't heard yet, an ABLE account is a type of tax advantage savings account that if an individual opens up the account through their state program, it could either be through the state of Maryland or through a different state that accepts out-of-state residents. Money that's put into the account is not going to count towards that $2,000 resource limit. This again was a product of federal law. It was passed in 2014, and then states were put in charge of creating their own programs. And again, because it's a product of federal law, there are some limitations on how these accounts can be used. There is, let's see, of the limitations I just want to focus on, the individual must have a disability that started before the age of 26. The qualifying disability, as mentioned, is either certification from a physician or that they're found eligible for Social Security benefits. For purposes of estate planning, I want to note that an individual can only have one ABLE account in their name, and there's also contribution limits. So, for example, in 2021, they only $15,000 can be added to the ABLE account over the course of the year. So, and then there are larger caps. So for the SSI program, an individual can't have more than $100,000 in the ABLE account, or they'll lose their eligibility for SSI income. And I wanted to point this out because for parents who were intending upon their death to leave everything to an ABLE account, because if their estate is greater than $15,000, they're not going to be able to do so, because again, the ABLE account can only receive $15,000 per year. So rather than leave funds to an ABLE account, we again encourage our parents to set up a third-party special needs trust for the benefit of their child with a disability. Let me see. ABLE accounts, similar to a special needs trust, once they are properly pulled together and funded, the funds that are in the account can be used to benefit the beneficiary or the account holder. And federal law says it has to be a qualified disability expense, but we have seen that to really be broadly construed and cover many expenses for an individual with a disability. So as I answer questions, I'm going to actually go back to my flow chart here of the different planning tools. But thank you for hanging me in there as I very quickly went through the different planning tools. I'm sorry it had to be so brief, but I do want to get to your questions, as I think those can often be the most helpful. So Nora, please take it from here. If you have any other questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. This has been super informative. I'm sorry, I mean Sage.
That's all right.
Okay, so first, SSA announced COLA increase for 2022, which will increase maximum SSI monthly payment from $794 to $841. Good news slash bad news. So I guess that's less a question than a statement.
I thought that was great news. I saw that headline this morning when I was looking at the
Yeah.
news. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, if I suspect that my brother is planning to leave money to my disabled daughter upon his death, should I encourage him to direct those funds to her special needs trust instead of being left to her directly?
Yeah, I would. I would. When we work with our families to set up a third-party trust, we provide them with a letter that they can send to other family members just to let the family members know. The letter states something like, we've set up this trust for our daughter. She receives these means-tested benefits. We're not asking you to leave her money, but if you are, it's really important that it goes into this trust and not to her directly. And this is how you cut a check to the trust. If the brother didn't leave funds to a special needs trust for this child, and instead the child was named individually, it would be necessary upon the brother's death to take steps to create one of these first party trusts, in which, again, upon the child's death, anything that's remaining would have to pay back the state of Maryland. So I'm not against funding the government, but as much as possible, we can help our clients preserve funds for their other family members. We like to do so by proactively making sure everything's funded through a third party special needs trust.
Great. Okay, next question. Can the trust come with a debit/credit card for the beneficiary to use?
So that depends on the circumstances. Generally, credit cards, no. A trust can't have I haven't known of a credit card company to give a credit card to a trust. A trust can have a debit card if the individual is on means test. I would generally not recommend that an individual beneficiary has access to a debit card that gives them access to all the funds in the trust. Just on a management viewpoint, that would could put the trustee at risk of losing the funds should the beneficiaries take out all the money. But also for the purposes of means tested benefits, if the beneficiary would have unlimited access to all that money, it would be considered available to her for purposes of her benefits. When administrating special needs trusts, we generally recommend the trustees to work with the beneficiary to prepay any routine monthly expenses, so such as set up payment for a cell phone plan directly, so money doesn't have to go to the beneficiary directly. If the beneficiary wants to purchase a furniture item, for example, they would just provide the link to how to purchase the furniture or TV to the trustee. The trustee purchased the item and has it delivered to the beneficiary. If the goal is to give the beneficiary access to some spending money, a special needs trust could deposit some funds in an ABLE account if the beneficiary has access to the ABLE account to use the funds. There are certain prepaid cards are called TrueLink cards that can also be used, but that's a more technical step, a step above a debit card that I don't really want to get into today. But if you Google TrueLink, there's a lot of information online about how those types of prepaid cards can be used.
Awesome. And if an individual has too much in assets to qualify for SSI, they must open a first party trust, right? Not every dollar should go into an ABLE account, right? Or should it?
If the only issue, let me see, if I had a client who was accumulating their Social Security income every month, just a little bit. They weren't able to spend all of it every month. In that circumstance, I would consider just putting it into an ABLE account. If a first party trust was already created, it's also an option to deposit those extra funds in a first party trust. The difference that I'm thinking through here is that an ABLE account is inexpensive to open. Kelly when we go to her presentation, she'll be able to tell you the exact enrollment fee, but I think it's like $40, at least it was at some point. Whereas the first party trust, creating one of those accounts is going to bring you into the thousands of dollars. So if you just have a small amount of funds that you want to set aside to maintain that eligibility for SSI, in that circumstance, I would consider an ABLE account again, because it's less expensive to open and manage. I hope that answered that question.
Awesome. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback. People are saying, thank you so much. Someone says, this special needs trust stuff finally makes sense to me.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And Nora's just reading them because I can't see the comments, but thank you.
And someone wants to know if you can have co-trustees for a checks and balances approach, or should you designate a successor as a trustee?
To answer the last question first, I would definitely recommend naming successors. So name it in order of priority of who you wish to serve. You can have two co-trustees serving at the same time. That just depends on the client's preferences, who they're having serving as trustee. In these materials, there was a slide of some considerations of characteristics that a trustee needs has. And if you have two people that can work well together, there's no reason not to have co-trustees. So whatever the parent would want.
And are there restrictions for distribution from the trust?
So for the third party trust, so that's going to depend on the type of trust you create. For the third party trust, the requirement is that the funds be used primarily for the benefit of the individual with the disability. Any restrictions on how the funds can be used is going to depend on the benefit programs that the beneficiary receives. So for example, if they're receiving SSI income, SSI has a rule that if a third party, including a trust, pays for the beneficiary's, let's say, shelter expenses or food, they're going to have their SSI benefit amount is going to be reduced by a certain amount. So the trustee is going to have to be familiar with the benefit programs in order to know what restrictions are on for the beneficiary to not affect their benefits. For the first party trusts, it's going to have that same requirement that it's used for the beneficiary. The trustee is also going to have to make sure they're aware of the rules for the benefit programs. But the first party trusts, again, have some very specific regulations I'm not going to bore people with today about requirements on how the funds can be used. Just as an example, funeral expenses have to be paid prior to the beneficiary's death. Joint accounts have to be titled in certain ways. So the first party trusts are just more nuanced in that realm.
Thank you. All right. If you have your home in a revocable trust, can the trust continue to keep the home so that the disabled child can continue to live there? Or would it be better to put the home in the name of the parent and child, then leave the home to the child?
This in my mind, this question may relate to a type of revocable living trust that's used to avoid probate, which wasn't the subject of this presentation. So I'm just gonna, how do I answer this one? Yes, generally a house can be left. So let me put it this way. When a parent is alive, whether or not they wish to keep the house in their name alone or in this revocable living trust to avoid the probate process is a separate question for their estate planning attorney, just depending on their personal circumstances. When it comes to the special needs planning for their child, I recommend putting it into a trust and not the child's name. For many benefit programs, an individual can own the residence that they live in, but if an individual doesn't have capacity to manage that property themselves, it's going to open up a whole nother host of issues. It would be necessary to maybe get guardianship just to manage this home. Whereas if the funds were put into, or whereas if the house was put into a special needs trust and additional funds were also put into the trust to maintain that property for the beneficiary, we can have the management and the expenses to maintaining the home covered within the trust entity. I hope that helps.
Thanks. All right, let's do one more specific question, and then there's some questions just about how to contact you and how to get guidance on setting up a trust and things like that we can cover in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But lastly, what about someone who's working and getting SSI, who's 19 years old, not sure what to do with his money in order to keep his benefits? We have an ABLE account, but not fond of restrictions.
This is a very specific question that I'm hesitant to answer because I'm not familiar with all the circumstances, but generally, as I'm sure this person knows, it is possible to receive SSI income and continue to work a bit. The Social Security Administration has a formula that they don't count earned income dollar for dollar off that $794 limit, but it would deduct their full benefit amount. The ABLE account can receive someone's earned income, and so my first thought is to put it into an ABLE account. Again, I appreciate there are some restrictions on these accounts, but it would be the most affordable way to set aside the money. If not, the only other option would be to open up a first party special needs trust. And again, the cost of entry to create one of these trusts, because it takes more work, would be at least $1,000 for the pooled trust account. So it just depends on how much funds are under consideration.
And to the person who asked me that question, asked that question, I put my email address in the chat. And if you are interested in learning about some work incentives and ways to keep benefits while working, send me an email and I'll connect you with maybe a benefits counselor.
That's great, Nora.
Great. All right, well, with that, can you answer people who are asking maybe how to get in touch with you or how to find guidance on setting up a special needs trust or an ABLE account themselves?
Yeah, so I'm going to go all the way to the end of my presentation.
Great.
If you wish to get in touch with me, I believe my email address, and I hope my phone number is on the first page of the slide. I work at the O'Byrne Law Office, which is spelled OBYRNE, Law Office. If you want more information about what I spoke about today, I want to point out some resources that are helpful. One, we have all information about the Maryland's ABLE program. The National ABLE Resource Center also provides very reliable information. And then the Special Needs Alliance as well. There's a lot of information online about special needs planning, and not all of it is accurate, but again, that the ABLE program resources I had listed on this presentation, as well as the Special Needs Alliance, are resources that can provide some additional information about creating special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. And so I think that was the last question. So I just again wanted to thank everybody for joining me here today. It was a pleasure to speak with you about these different planning tools.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again, Sage. This has been great. And thank you everyone for attending. Be sure to check out the rest of the sessions that we have going on for the rest of the month, because everything's been really good so far. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.